I felt a knot form in my stomach as I slid the crumpled receipt out of Ryan's pants pocket. My hands trembled slightly as I smoothed it open to reveal the total, $3,250 for what looked like jewelry from an upscale boutique downtown. My mind raced, trying to make sense of this extravagant purchase that he had clearly tried to hide from me. "What's taking so long, honey?" Ryan called out from the dining room, snapping me back to reality. I shoved the receipt back into his pocket and headed out, plastering a smile on my face. Nothing, just got distracted for a second. As we sat eating our dinner in tense silence, my eyes kept darting over to Ryan, studying his casual demeanor. How could he act so normal when he was clearly keeping something huge from me? "Mom, are you okay?" Jenna's concerned voice pulled me from my spiraling thoughts. "You seem out of it tonight." "I'm fine, sweetie," I lied, offering her a reassuring smile before turning to Ryan. "So, did anything interesting happen at work today?" Ryan shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "Nah, just the usual grind. You know how it is." I fought back the urge to press him further, not wanting to start an argument in front of Jenna. But as I cleared the dishes later that night, my mind couldn't let go of that damning receipt and the secrets it hinted at. The next few days passed in a blur of faked normalcy. I found myself watching Ryan's every move, scrutinizing his behavior for any other signs of betrayal. The distance between us grew palpable, like a thick fog separating our once happy home. One evening, as Ryan headed out for his usual work drinks, I couldn't resist the temptation any longer. I slipped into his home office and booted up his computer, my heart pounding as I scoured through his financial records. And there it was, a separate bank account I'd never known about, with tens of thousands of dollars flowing through it. I felt sick to my stomach as the truth began to crystallize. Ryan was leading a double life, and that expensive purchase was just the tip of the iceberg. Tears stung my eyes as I realized the man I thought I knew was nothing but a web of lies. That night, as Ryan slept beside me, I lay awake, my mind racing with a million questions and a burning determination to uncover the full truth, no matter how painful it might be. I knew in that moment that nothing would ever be the same again, but I had to be strong, for myself and for Jenna. This was just the beginning of a long, arduous battle, but I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. Over the next few weeks, I turned into a detective, meticulously following every financial trail that Ryan left behind. With each new discovery, the pit in my stomach grew deeper as the full extent of his betrayal came into focus. The separate bank account held rental payments for a luxury apartment just a few miles from our home. I spent countless sleepless nights agonizing over who he could be meeting there, imagining the worst kinds of sordid affairs and indulgences. At home, the tension between us was suffocating. Ryan seemed increasingly distant and irritable, snapping at me and Jenna over the smallest things. "What's going on with you two lately?" Jenna asked one evening as we cleaned up after another frigid family dinner. "It's like you can't even stand to be in the same room together." I forced a reassuring smile, not wanting to burden my daughter with the harsh realities. "It's just been a stressful time at work for your dad." "Everything's fine, sweetie." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but I knew the truth would devastate her. I had to keep pressing forward, gathering as much evidence as possible before confronting Ryan. Finally, after weeks of meticulous planning, I decided it was time to uncover the final piece of the puzzle. With trembling hands, I typed the address of the apartment into my GPS and began the short drive that felt like an eternity. As I pulled up to the sleek high-rise, my heart pounded in my chest. Taking a deep breath, I steeled my nerves and made my way inside, following the directions to the correct unit. The door was slightly ajar, and as I peered inside, my world shattered into a million pieces. There was Ryan, laughing and embracing a stunning young woman, their intimacy undeniable. "You lying, cheating bastard!" The words erupted from my mouth before I could stop them. Ryan whirled around, his eyes widening in horror as he saw me standing there. "Elise, I can explain." "Save it," I spat, fury coursing through my veins. "I know all about your little slush fund and this love nest you've been keeping." The other woman quickly gathered her things and slipped past me, offering a mumbled apology. But I barely registered her presence, my focus entirely locked on the man who had so callously shredded the vows we had made before God. Ryan opened and closed his mouth like a gasping fish, unable to formulate a defense against the mountain of evidence I had amassed. "Don't even bother trying to deny it," I hissed, taking a step closer, unflinching despite the tears streaming down my face. "We're through, Ryan. I want a divorce, and I'm taking Jenna and everything you're worth." With those words, I turned on my heel and stormed out, leaving him sputtering in my wake. The war had begun, and I would show no mercy. The drive home from Ryan's apartment felt like a blur, my mind racing with a million thoughts and emotions. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the initial tsunami of rage had subsided, giving way to a cold, steely resolve. I knew confronting him directly would only lead to more lies and manipulation. No, to win this war, I needed to play things smart and strategic. I needed an ally in my corner who could guide me through the legal minefield ahead. The next morning, I made my way to Lauren's office, the click of my heels echoing down the marbled hallway with determination. She was an old friend from nursing school who had gone on to become a formidable divorce attorney. "Elise, this is a surprise," Lauren greeted me warmly as I entered her office. "What brings you by?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "It's Ryan. I've discovered he's been cheating on me and siphoning money into a secret account." Her expression hardened as I laid out all the sordid details, presenting her with the damning evidence I'd gathered. "That lying snake," she muttered, shaking her head. "Don't worry, we're going to make sure he pays for this, dearly." Over the next few weeks, Lauren became my guide through the treacherous legal labyrinth of divorce proceedings. She advised me on documenting every interaction, keeping meticulous records that would hold up in court. "We need to ensure you get not only primary custody of Jenna, but also your fair share of assets and spousal support," she emphasized. "Ryan's going to fight dirty, but I'll make sure he doesn't pull any fast ones." At home, I maintained an icy facade around Ryan, refusing to engage in any unnecessary conversation. He tried multiple times to explain himself, to plead for my forgiveness, but I simply turned a deaf ear. "Elise, please, you have to understand." He begged one night after another of his feeble attempts. "What we had, it was real. This whole thing with Stacy, it was just a stupid mistake, a lapse in judgment." I fixed him with a withering glare. "Save your breath, Ryan. I'm done listening to your lies." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him gaping helplessly in my wake. His mask slipped more and more in those ensuing weeks, revealing the ugly, selfish core that I had been too blind to see before. Rage, desperation, pleas for mercy. I weathered them all with the same cold indifference. Meanwhile, I poured all my energy into being there for Jenna, providing her with the support and guidance she needed to navigate the turbulent waters of high school amid our family crisis. She was my unwavering light in the darkness, my reason for pressing forward no matter how weary I became. And as the court date loomed ever closer, I knew I was ready to unleash the full force of my case against Ryan. He had made his bed, and now it was time to lie in the ashes of everything he had destroyed. With Lauren's guidance, I began methodically securing my financial position, ensuring that when the divorce went through, Ryan wouldn't be able to squirm his way out of providing for me and Jenna. We combed through years of bank statements and tax records, separating out my income and assets from the tainted pool he had depleted to fund his tawdry double life. Every dollar, every investment, we meticulously documented it all to present an airtight case. "He's going to try to hide money, claim certain assets don't exist," Lauren warned me. "But I've dealt with slimeballs like him before. We'll make sure he can't wiggle out of his responsibilities." At home, Ryan continued his desperate attempts to win me back, bringing me lavish gifts and making empty promises to change his ways. "Come on, babe," he pleaded one evening, holding out an ostentatious diamond necklace. "You know I'd do anything for you and Jenna. Just give me one more chance." I eyed the jewelry with disdain. "You really think you can buy me off with some trinket from the same place you bought gifts for your mistress?" His face fell as my words hit their mark. "Elise, Save it," I cut him off sharply. "Your words mean nothing to me now. Just be glad I'm not taking you for every last penny." As the weeks ticked by, Ryan's behavior grew increasingly erratic. Manic mood swings, drunken rages where he'd hurl accusations at me, blaming me for his misery. I weathered them all with the same stoic defiance. It was during one of those volatile outbursts that Jenna finally saw her father's true colors. He had been ranting and raving, smashing dishes against the wall in a fit of anger. "Dad, stop! You're scaring me!" Jenna cried out, tears streaming down her face. The sound of her terrified voice seemed to pierce through the red haze of fury, and Ryan froze, suddenly aware of the monster he had become. "Oh, God." "Jenna, I'm so sorry," he stammered, reaching out a hand towards her. "I didn't mean—" But she shrank back from him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and revulsion I had never seen before. In that moment, I knew she had made her choice on which parent to stand behind. After that night, an unspoken coldness lingered between Jenna and her father. She retreated into herself, pulling away from Ryan's increasingly pathetic attempts to make amends. "I can't stand to be around him anymore," she confided in me one day after school. "How could he do this to us, Mom? To you?" I pulled her into a tight embrace, my heart aching at how deeply Ryan's selfish actions had wounded her. "I'm so sorry you had to see that side of him, sweetie, but you don't have to worry anymore, okay? It'll all be over soon." And indeed, with each passing day, I could feel the inexorable wheels of justice turning, propelling us all towards the final, devastating confrontation that would obliterate what remained of Ryan's false life. There would be no escape, no opportunity to slither away from the consequences he had brought upon himself. My revenge was nearly complete. The day of the big confrontation dawned bright and clear. A cruel mockery of the storm that was about to be unleashed. As I stepped into the bathroom to get ready, I could barely recognize the woman staring back at me in the mirror. Gone was the naive, trusting wife I had once been, replaced by a battle-hardened warrior ready to destroy the man who had so callously betrayed her. With a steadying breath, I smoothed my hands over the crisp lines of my power suit and headed downstairs, my heels clicking out a cadence of determination. Ryan was already in the living room, pacing back and forth like a caged animal, his head whipped up as I entered, eyes wild and desperate. "Elise, thank God," he began, rushing towards me. "Listen, we don't have to go through with this whole divorce thing. I'll do anything, change anything, that just please don't take Jenna away from me." I fixed him with an icy glare that stopped him in his tracks. "Save your pathetic begging, Ryan. It's too late for that now." With a flick of my wrist, I tossed a thick manila envelope onto the coffee table, the impact making him flinch. "Everything you need to know is in there. Details on your financial treachery, evidence of your affair, even testimony from that little tart you were sleeping with." Ryan's face drained of color as he tore open the envelope, cold, hard proof of his sins staring back at him in black and white. "How?" was all he could manage to choke out. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out everything?" I sneered. "That I'd just turn a blind eye while you ran around like some frat boy with your little slush fund and side piece?" With each blistering word, I could see him shrinking further, the arrogant mask crumbling to reveal the sniveling coward underneath. "You've got nothing, Ryan. No more lies to hide behind, no more of my love and trust to take for granted." He opened his mouth to protest, but I silenced him with a raised hand. "I want a divorce, full custody of Jenna, and my fair share of assets and spousal support. The paperwork's already been filed, and I have a damn good lawyer, so don't even think about trying to fight me on this." Tears welled up in Ryan's eyes as the magnitude of his impending downfall washed over him. "Elise, please. I'll do anything. I love you. You have to believe me." I fought back the urge to spit in his face, barely managing to keep my disgust contained. "If you really loved me, you never would have done this to our family, to Jenna. I wanted to spend my life loving and cherishing you, building a real future together. But instead you pissed it all away on your selfish whims and indulgences." I leaned in close, my voice a low, dangerous hiss. "Well, now it's time to pay the price. The free ride is over, Ryan. From now on, you're going to be nothing but a ghost, haunting the world of the life you destroyed, watching from afar as Jenna and I move on without you." The tears streamed freely down his face now, but I felt no pity, no shred of remorse for utterly dismantling him. This man, this pathetic shell trembling before me, had severed every tie that bound us together through his selfish actions. As I turned and strode from the room, leaving him crumpled amid the wreckage of his lies, I felt an almost serene sense of closure. The war was won, vengeance exacted in full. It was time to look ahead and start building a new life from the ashes of betrayal. The divorce proceedings were a brutal, no-holds-barred spectacle that played out over several months. Ryan fought me every step of the way, desperately grasping at any lifeline that could allow him to cling to his ill-gotten riches and status. "Your Honor, my client has been more than reasonable in her demands," Lauren stated calmly during one heated courtroom session. "Mr. Warner's continual attempts to hide assets and deceive this court are only further proof of his utter disregard for his legal and moral obligations." On the stand, Ryan squirmed like a worm on a hook, his carefully crafted lies disintegrating under the weight of the evidence we had amassed against him. "I was simply putting money aside for retirement," he blustered, beads of sweat forming on his brow. "That apartment was just an investment property." Lauren pounced like a lioness spotting weakness in her prey. "Is that so, Mr. Warner? Then I'm sure you won't mind explaining why your secret apartment was furnished so intimately?" She turned towards the stern-faced judge and held up glossy photographs, unmistakable images of candle-lit dinners, rumpled silk sheets, and other telling intimacies. "Somehow, I don't think these are standard issue for a rental unit intended as a mere investment." Ryan's mouth opened and closed uselessly as his crumbling facade was gleefully stripped away. With each salacious revelation, I could see the disgust and contempt mounting in the old judge's eyes. Outside the courtroom, the fallout from the scandal grew more inescapable with each passing day. News of Ryan's deceit, both personal and financial, had spread like wildfire through our small community. His former friends and colleagues shunned him, letting their disdain be known with shakes of the head or outright confrontations whenever our paths crossed. Even complete strangers would shoot him looks of undisguised scorn as he slunk through town like a whipped dog. At the construction sites where he used to be admired, workers and subcontractors alike refused to have anything to do with him, a well-earned reputation for untrustworthiness in an industry that prized integrity. "That piece of trash ain't ever setting foot on one of my job sites again," one burly foreman spat at Ryan from the cab of his truck. "Do us all a favor and crawl back under whatever rock you slithered out from." Through it all, Jenna remained my unwavering pillar of strength. Far from being a sullen, emotional wreck, she carried herself with remarkable poise, never wavering in her condemnation of her father's heinous actions. "He deserves everything that's coming to him," she stated in a flat, resolute tone after another grueling day on the witness stand. "I just wish men like him could see how much they hurt the people who love them most." As the case mercifully began winding towards its inevitable conclusion, even Ryan seemed to shrink under the weight of his sins, offering only token protests as his world crumbled around him. His shoulders sagged with the realization that he had gambled everything and lost in spectacular fashion. And then, finally, the hammer fell, the judge's ruling utterly eviscerating any delusional hopes Ryan may have harbored. Full custody awarded to me, alimony and child support payments that would bleed him dry for years to come, a property settlement heavily tilting the assets in my favor as a reward for my restraint and preparedness. I couldn't help but let out a small, self-satisfied smile as Ryan hung his head in defeat. The once arrogant charmer was now thoroughly defanged, a shattered husk of a man condemned to a life of irreversible ruin and destitution. Justice at long last had been served. Even after the official legal proceedings had run their course, the fallout from Ryan's reprehensible actions continued to ripple through our community. It was as if the rot at the core of his being had been laid bare for all to see, irrevocably poisoning anything and everything he had once been involved with. Former business associates wanted nothing to do with him, abruptly terminating long-standing contracts and partnerships. Several major projects he had been hired for suddenly found themselves seeking new contractors at the last minute. "We have a reputation to uphold," one developer stated bluntly when asked about dropping Ryan. "Someone like that, with no ethics or morals to speak of? Not a chance we'd let him anywhere near one of our job sites." The isolation and rejection only seemed to plunge Ryan into an ever deeper spiral of self-destruction. Where he had once been a charming, confident figure, I now saw flashes of a wild-eyed, haggard stranger whenever our paths briefly crossed. "You think you've won, don't you?" he snarled at me during a heated custody exchange one afternoon. "You and your hotshot lawyer stripping me of everything I've worked for." I remained calm and impassive, refusing to be rattled. "I'm simply taking what's rightfully mine, Ryan. What you worked for was built on a foundation of lies and cheating. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences?" His face contorted with rage, and for a fleeting moment I was afraid he might try to strike me. But the moment passed, that flicker of violence subsumed by overwhelming self-pity and resignation. I'm sorry, Elise. I never meant for any of this to happen," he mumbled, looking and sounding every inch the broken man. "You have to believe me." But his pleas fell on deaf ears. Too much had happened, too much trust irreparably shattered. I simply shook my head and turned away, leaving him in his pathetic puddle of remorse. If the ostracization from our community wasn't harsh enough, Ryan soon found himself contending with the ultimate insult: Jenna's cold indifference. Our daughter, once the apple of his eye, now viewed him as little more than a vaguely pitiful stranger. "I don't even know who you are anymore," she stated flatly during one of their infrequent visits. "All I see is this sad, broken person who threw away the love of his family for... what? A fling? Some cheap thrills?" Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but Jenna silenced him with a raised hand, her eyes blazing with a maturity far beyond her years. "Don't bother denying it or making excuses. I'm disappointed in you, Dad. Disappointed that you chose to put your selfish desires over everything and everyone else that should have mattered most." As she walked away, leaving him crumpled on his ratty couch amid the squalor of his new rented apartment, I couldn't help but feel a perverse sense of pride and vindication. This was the monster of his own making, the karmic price to be paid in full. In the weeks that followed, Jenna and I began to settle into our new normal. Just the two of us, forging ahead with a strength and resilience that continually amazed me. Gone were the tensions, the walking on eggshells, the weight of Ryan's emotional chaos constantly threatening to drag us under. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could finally exhale and simply live. Savor each new day as it came, revel in Jenna's accomplishments, and bask in the warm embrace of our support network without the specter of betrayal looming overhead. Ryan had gambled everything in pursuit of selfish gratification, and in the end, lost it all in spectacular fashion. Now, as a mere ghost of his former self, he was left to wander the periphery of our lives, a cautionary specter serving as a permanent reminder of the high cost of reckless indulgence. The months following the finalization of my divorce from Ryan were a whirlwind of rebuilding and reclamation. With the legal victory firmly in hand, I could finally turn my focus to constructing the stable, prosperous life that Jenna and I deserved. The first order of business was restoring order to our family home, ripping out any lingering remnants of Ryan's presence, and redecorating to reflect our fresh start. We spent countless hours scouring home goods stores and poring over design magazines, creating a space that was warm, inviting, and undeniably ours. "I love what you've done with the living room," my friend Stacy gushed during one of her visits. "So bright and airy, definitely an upgrade from the old man cave vibe." I couldn't help but smile at the subtle dig towards Ryan's former decor choices. Well, we wanted to make sure there wasn't a single trace of him left to bring us down. With our sanctuary established, I threw myself into nurturing Jenna's budding independence and ambitions. Now unburdened by the toxic negativity her father had brought into our lives, I saw her blossom into a confident, driven young woman with a bright future ahead of her. We explored colleges and universities, mapping out the first steps towards reaching her dreams of becoming an engineer. I beamed with pride as she recounted her latest academic accomplishments or extracurricular endeavors, taking every opportunity to remind her how capable and resilient she had proven herself to be. "You've grown into such an incredible person, sweetheart," I told her one evening as we lounged together on the patio, enjoying the early summer warmth. "All the pain and upheaval with your dad, You handled it all with more maturity and grace than I could have ever hoped for." Jenna gave a modest shrug, but I caught the faint blush of pride coloring her cheeks. "I had a pretty amazing role model to learn from. You were the real rock through all of that." Her gaze turned pensive for a beat. "I don't know if I could have made it without your strength." Tears pricked my eyes as I pulled her into a fierce hug, overcome with the realization that even when the world had seemed bleakest, our love and devotion to each other had seen us through. We were heroes to ourselves, forged from the fires of adversity into an inseparable unit, unstoppable, unbreakable. As for Ryan, well, news of his continued downward spiral occasionally filtered back to us, though those reports grew fewer and farther between. Words of bankruptcies and debts left unpaid, failed attempts to resuscitate his ruined reputation, unwanted appearances and desperate pleas for attention or forgiveness. I would simply shake my head at each new tale of his pathetic antics, feeling a mixture of pity and revulsion. Once upon a time, this man had been my entire world, the one I had pledged eternity and fidelity. And he had carelessly discarded it all for a fleeting taste of tawdry ego-stroking. "That's just sad," was all Jenna could muster whenever another update on Ryan's self-inflicted misery came to light. Her voice was tinged with melancholy, but also resignation. He had made his own bed through a callous succession of selfish choices. Now he was left to rot in it, utterly alone. As the years began to march steadily onwards, the memory of the broken man who had once been Jenna's father grew hazier and more distant with each passing day. What had once been a gaping emotional wound gradually scabbed over, replaced by the warmth and fullness of our thriving new reality. Perhaps someday I would find it in my heart to pity Ryan, to lament the utter waste of the life he had so callously discarded. But not today. Today I had a world to conquer alongside my daughter, a brilliant, resilient, endlessly capable young woman forged in the flames of her father's failings. No matter what treacherous roads may yet lie ahead, I knew we would face them head-on, armed with an unbreakable bond of love, perseverance, and the knowledge that we alone defined our own destines. The shadows Ryan had once cast over our lives had dissipated like a morning fog burning off under the radiant sun. We were free.